So you've recently heard of the term net worth, but you're still a little bit confused and you've got questions like, what even is a net worth? Why is everyone talking about assets and liabilities? What does it mean if my net worth's positive? What if it's negative? And how do I even increase or improve it? Well, Auntie V is coming here for you again, so we're going to be answering those exact questions. So hopefully by the end of this video, you will know exactly what you need to be doing when it comes to your net worth. Okay, Auntie V, we've done this plenty of times, so you know what I'm going to say. What exactly do we mean by net worth? So if you're a current subscriber to my channel, then you will know that I always love to look at the Google definition first before I give my own opinion. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, you may as well do that. And whilst you're down there, you may as well give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help to support the channel, plus it's free. So in this case, I'm just going to take a quick look at Investopedia and see what it says. So Investopedia says that the net worth is the value of the assets a person or corporation owns minus the liabilities they owe. It's an important metric to gauge a company's health, providing a useful snapshot of its current financial position. So when I'm thinking about net worth, yes, you might be looking at the company's financial position, but you can also be looking at your own personal finances. So really it's looking at your own assets, so things that you will usually own, versus your liabilities, so things that you will usually owe. Now, I think it's actually important to understand the difference, because what you may think is an asset may not actually be an asset and may actually be a liability. So what I do really like is Robert's definitions of assets and liabilities. So it's a little bit different, and he does mention this in the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, so of course that link will be in the description below for you. But what he basically says is assets really put money in your pocket, whereas liabilities tend to take money out of your pocket. So really when I'm personally looking at my assets, I tend to think about things that are likely to put money in my pocket or maybe have some sense of value because I own it. So for example, you might be looking at investments like stocks, property, commodities, so things like gold and silver, even things like cryptocurrency as well, or even things like your own cash. So for example, if you've got savings, that could also be considered an asset in your net worth. But with liabilities, it's really going to be based on things that you actually owe. Or in Robert's case, he likes to think that liabilities actually just take money out of your pocket. So when I'm thinking about liabilities, examples could include things like high interest debt. So for example, if you've got credit card debt, maybe if your car is financed, or if you've got any personal loans, anything like that will be considered liabilities. The mortgage on your house would also be considered a liability, as well as things like student loans as well. Now again, when you're looking at your net worth, specifically with student loans, it's kind of a funny one depending on the country that you're from. So for example, if you're somewhere in the US, most likely you will really want to include those student loans, especially because of the way you tend to pay back your student loans. Whereas with the UK, it's a little bit different, because yes, although you may want to include it in your net worth statement, the way you actually pay off your student loan is going to be very, very different. So I do have a video that talks about that in a bit more detail, and if you do want to check that out, I will link that up here for you and in the description below. But again, with liabilities, it's really based on things that you owe. So if you owe credit card debt, you are basically owing money to the credit card, so that is a liability. Now where it starts to get a little bit tricky with your net worth statement is really based on some of the things that you may call assets that may be liabilities. So for example, with Robert Kiyosaki, he tends to say that your house isn't actually an asset and it's a liability instead. Excuse me? Now the reason why he says that is because when it comes to your house, if it's your own primary residence, you're really still paying for things that's actually taking money out of your pocket. And again, in his terms, when he talks about assets, he's really thinking about things that will actually put money in your pocket and not take it out. So for example, with your house, so your primary residence, even if you have a paid off mortgage, you are still paying for things in the house. So you might be paying for things like maintenance. If the boiler breaks down, you have to pay money to fix it. The same with your roof. If that collapses, then you have to pay money to fix it. Now this is just his opinion, and it's really going to depend on how you actually see your primary residence, but some people will actually put their primary residence in their liability section rather than their assets. On the other hand, obviously with your primary residence, people still see that as an asset because it can also grow in value. So again, it's really going to depend on your personal circumstances and your beliefs as well. But what other people will argue is that yes, your house is actually your asset, it's just that your mortgage is your liability. And it's very similar with your car. So in accounting terms, technically your car would be considered an asset, and then your car finance would then be considered a liability, because that's really the part that you owe. Obviously if you own your own house or your car, then technically that could be classed as an asset. But again, in Robert Kiyosaki's terms, if it's not actually putting money in your pocket, then he won't regard it as an asset and he'll regard it as a liability. So really it's just going to depend on what you think is right and where you actually want to put that. So for example, when I'm doing my own net worth statement, I probably would put my own primary residence, so the equity of the house, so what you actually owe in the house, I probably will put that in the asset section. And then if I had a mortgage, that would be in the liability section. However, with my mindset, I don't really tend to see it as much of an asset very much. I do tend to see it as just a place that I want to live in and that I'm not really planning on making making money on it. So really, again, it's going to depend on your mindset and your own beliefs. Likewise with the car, even though I owned my car outright because I'd already paid off my car finance, I technically wouldn't actually see it as an asset for my own personal net worth statement. So I don't really tend to include it in my net worth statement. But you may feel differently. Again, it's personal finance for a reason. But really, when it comes to your net worth statement, what most people will have under their assets is really the house equity they have on their own house, maybe the investments, so things like your stocks, if you've got rental property, and then with their liabilities columns, it's going to be things again like your credit card debt. And again, your net worth statement will be your assets minus your liability. Okay, Auntie B, I think I get it. So what should I be aiming for? So really, when it comes to your net worth and your net worth statement, ideally what you want to do is have more assets than your liabilities. And that is really the secret to gaining wealth. And actually, if you do want to take it further, which is what I absolutely love about Rich Dad Poor Dad, it really talks about gaining as many assets as possible so that it can actually pay for your liabilities. So for example, if I'm really focused on building my asset column, then I'm probably going to be focusing on investments. So things like the stock market or things like property, so that I can build as much as possible. So in this case, let's say that I'm focusing on rental properties and I'm able to get cash flow. When I'm really building that up, that cash flow could then pay for my liabilities. So it could then pay for my mortgage, for example, or it could pay for my car, or it could pay for anything else. Really, that's going to be a key goal for a lot of you because essentially it means you're financially independent. Okay, so assets, liabilities, I've got it now. So when you're doing your own net worth statement, you really want to look at how many assets you have versus your liabilities. Obviously, if you have a lot more liabilities, so for example, let's say that you've got a whole load of credit card debt, you've got your car on finance, maybe you've got a personal loan or anything like that, really you want to start to reduce those liabilities and then start increasing your asset column. Whereas if you find out that you actually have a lot more assets, so for example, you've got things like investments or savings or anything like that, then you really just want to continue increasing that even more and probably even accelerating it if you can. But again, for most people, ideally what you want to be doing is decreasing your liabilities and increasing your assets. When I'm also talking about liabilities, I'm really focusing on that high interest debt first before you maybe think about other forms of long-term debt. Because again, whether you choose to pay off your mortgage early or not, for example, is another conversation. Some people would really prefer to actually increase their asset column first before doing that, whereas other people would prefer to actually pay off their mortgage. And obviously some people will want to do a hybrid of the two. But for me personally, that high interest debt, like your credit card debt, car loans, that's really going to be attacked first when it comes to your liabilities. And then again, you have the freedom to choose whether you now want to then focus on your assets. Maybe you also want to pay off your mortgage, or you decide to do a bit of both. That is totally up to you. How about we do 50-50? 50% we pay off the mortgage, 50% goes to investments. Now, if you do want a bit more detail about whether you should be paying off debt or investing, I do actually have a video on that already. So of course, I'll link that up here for you and in the description below. But then when it comes to assets, again, you really want to be increasing your investments and your savings. So for example, are you currently investing in the stock market, or are you investing in property, or do you have any savings? Ideally, you want to be increasing that as much as possible. Now, if you are new to investing, I do actually have a video talking through the different investment classes that you could potentially be investing in. So of course, I'll link that in the description below for you. But again, I cannot stress enough when you're trying to increase your asset column that you really want to start thinking about investing your money, because over time, those investments, so those assets, could then start to pay for your liabilities. And that is exactly how the rich get richer. I'm really wanting that new Tesla, you know. I could work out how many assets I need to buy to pay for the Tesla. So again, if you've got a few rental properties and these are assets which are currently paying you about £3,000 a month, so £3,000 is coming in, but then your expenses and your mortgage, for example, only comes to £2,000 a month, then those assets are paying for those liabilities. And essentially that is the key to financial independence. And that is exactly what Robert Kiyosaki is talking about, because he's not saying that he doesn't want you to have any liabilities whatsoever. So for example, if I saw my car as a liability, he's not saying not to have that car, but what he's saying is to essentially pay for it in the right way. So ideally at the end, you probably want a positive net worth, because that means you have more assets versus your liabilities, or having a negative net worth. So really focus on building those assets. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, are you currently building up your assets? I do post every Tuesday and Friday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.